Hello, beautiful human, and welcome back to the Rhyme Magic Show. This is the second part to my sharing of experience, stories, learnings of spending 10 days in the wilderness doing a survival challenge in remote Queensland. So if you haven't seen the first part, go check that out before you listen to this. And in this one, we're going to go into a bunch of other learnings. So before we get into the episode, inviting you to send me a message and connect if you're yet to do that. Ryan@ryanmagic.com, email, or at the Ryan Magic, the Instagram handle. Would love to hear a message from you and get to connect. So let's get into the episode today. Yesterday's experience, I don't know if you watched this on YouTube or on the actual podcast, but the video of it was almost pitch black by the time I finished the episode yesterday. So we're at a fresh new day today. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the fears and the intensity of animal experiences that I had, and also talk a lot about my impact around mental health, spending so much time in wild hunting. And so let's just get straight into it. So to be honest, the first thing that was coming up for me in this experience that was scaring me most, it wasn't the fact that it was going to be 45 degrees Celsius every day, or that I was going to not find food and die, because I knew that I could, even if I didn't catch anything, I could still survive for 10 days. It was my fear of either one of two things happening. Number one, getting bitten by a venomous snake and not getting medical attention in time and dying, or two, getting taken by a crocodile and dying. They were my two fears. And so for the first, I'm going to say 5 days, I'm going to say 3 to 5 days, and more concentrated at the start of the journey, I was terrified that I was going to be bitten by a snake. And so every step I was taking on the journey, I was looking to see if there was a death adder or some kind of brown snake or a tiger snake, any kind of venomous snake hiding under the leaf litter. And so this was a pretty stressful way to approach the experience right off the bat, because it was literally every single step, and we were taking thousands and thousands of steps every single day through bushland, through dense vegetation and leaf litter and dead branches and foliage, and it was really overwhelming. And because of the fact that we were 300 plus kilometers away from any other human being, it was so remote that I was thinking, look, I'm going to die if I get bitten by a venomous snake. We had an emergency beacon, which is a survival gadget you can buy from camping stores, that if you sound the alarm, it automatically notifies authorities and the appropriate people that an emergency has happened, and it has all of your details connected in the back end of it. And so I was thinking, all right, we're walking 3 to 5 kilometers away from our camp setup, our car. Well, he had like a really intense off-road car and trailer setup, but we were walking for kilometers away from that car when we were on little hunting missions, if we could hear animals in the distance or whatnot. And so I was thinking, if I'm 4 kilometers away from the car, it's going to take him 30 to 60 minutes to get back to the car, to get the beacon, to sound the alarm. Then it's going to take them, who knows how long, 2 to 5 hours by helicopter to come and get me. And then it's going to take 2 to 5 hours by helicopter to get back to some kind of hospital. And I could be dead by then. And so I was freaking out for that whole initial period of time. And then it got to the 4th day. And this is also one of the magic moments that I wanted to share, but I'm going to just weave it into this story. Just got a huge list of different things to share. This was one of my favorite moments of the whole experience. So anyway, I say to Adam, look, after the 4th day, man, can I get your help on overcoming my fear of snakes? Because it's really impacting me. And if you can help, that'd be great. And I had a feeling, because he's such a wild man. If you go into his Instagram, his name's Adam Kavanagh, and it was in the show notes. It'll be in the show notes of this and the last podcast episode. And you'll see that there's photos of him. One of his pinned photos on Instagram is him holding a massive crocodile that he's just caught himself in the wild. So this guy feels very safe in intense animal situations. And so I had a feeling he might look for, catch a snake and just kind of, or he might say some stuff to me. And so he was like, all right, I hear your request and we're going to go out at night tonight looking for snakes. And I was like, oh man, why do we have to go out at night? And he was like, well, at nighttime around a pond or body of water, often snakes will go hunting for animals that that are out at night, like frogs, for example. So I was like, all right. And I was super nervous then because I couldn't even look where I was going and I didn't want to step on a snake in the dark. And we had head torches, so that was helpful. But we went looking for snakes. And this, just to give you an idea of what I thought was crazy with this guy, is that there was a chance there was crocodiles in this body of water. Not a huge chance based on his evaluation, but we were in crocodile territory. And we're around this massive pond or a dam kind of thing, but a natural water hole, and walking around the edge looking for snakes. And then out of nowhere, he's like, oh my gosh, I think I see a crocodile. And then I'm jump back from the water's edge. He jumps into the water to try to catch it. And he thought it was a small one, but he jumped into the water in night, fully clothed, to try to grab this crocodile. And that was just an example. And I'm thinking, man, what's he going to do with the snake here? And so anyway, we keep going and he sees a snake. I didn't see it, but slither under a rock. And so he kind of turns the rock over and there's a snake under it. It's a small snake, but he couldn't tell whether it was venomous or not. And he just left it. He couldn't tell whether it was a brown snake or a tree snake. And he just left it. We just left it. And I was like, all right, there's one snake. And it wasn't big, that snake, but there was also a massive spider under that rock. All these sort of creepy crawly things. We keep walking around. We see another snake. It looks kind of similar. Don't know whether it's venomous or not, so he leaves it. And then we walk. And this has probably been about 15 minutes. And then we keep walking around this pond. And he just all of a sudden dashes into the darkness and just lose sight of him. And I just hear all this rattling and crashing and all this sounds of like him fighting something. And then he just comes, I can hear him walking back towards me and he's holding a snake. And I was like freaking out a bit because he was pretty close to me. And I knew that he would probably try to get me closer or try to get me to pat it. And it was kind of slithering up and down his arms and waving itself around a bit. And then it started to settle down a little bit. And he said, look, see? And then he literally says, now you hold. And instead of saying, hey, would you like to hold? He says, now you hold. And I'm exaggerating slightly, but he pretty much throws the snake at me. So he just puts it on me. And all of a sudden, I'm holding a snake. And I'm initially in a bit of a freeze response. And then I was just being very gentle with it. And I was holding this thing that I was previously terrified of in my hands. And as I started to calm down and relax, I realized something, which was one of the most beautiful experiences of the whole trip for me, was that there was this snake, and I had been watching wild pigs, birds, wild cows, bulls, kangaroos, horses, like wild brumbies, all sorts of different animals at this point I think it was the fourth night up until this point. And every single creature was crazy, like terrified, bolting around, running off, freaking out. If you got close, it'd try to attack you if it felt like it didn't have time to get away, or it'd just sprint off. And here I am holding the animal that I was arguably most afraid of in my hands. And it is the most trusting of all the creatures that I had been in close proximity to up until that point. It was just chilled out, relaxed, letting me hold it. Wasn't even moving much. It was just like gently, calmly slithering around. And it was beautiful. Its snake skin was iridescent. It was glowing in the light and reflecting all these rainbow colors off it. It was absolutely beautiful. And I just felt so honored, especially in contrast to the other animals that I'd been near, that it was allowing me to hold it and trusting me. And it completely shifted my relationship to snakes. And at that point, I actually made a decision that the snake was going to be one of my animal totems. And so that was beautiful. And there was a really amazing transmission that it gifted me, which was giving myself permission to be courageous enough to be held. That was the message that was coming through for me with this beautiful creature. It doesn't even know me. And it's letting this other animal, me being an animal, hold it in its hands. It doesn't even have arms or legs. The only way it can defend itself is by throwing its face at me and putting its fangs into me, which means it's going to lose its fangs and potentially have to dislocate its jaw to defend itself. That's it. It can't really do anything else. And it's still trusting me. And because one of the biggest karmic lessons I've had over the last 2 years since being in my current sacred relationship, sacred union, is the fear that I have of intimacy and closeness and the resistance I have to letting myself be held. It was just a beautiful reminder of that, beautiful reminder of trust and surrender. So it was a real beautiful moment. It was one of the most beautiful moments of the trip. And didn't mean that I wasn't afraid because it was a non-venomous snake. It was a python. It didn't mean that I wasn't afraid of getting bitten by a venomous snake, but I wasn't looking out everywhere. I was a lot more trusting from that point on. Now, let me talk about crocodiles for a moment, because there was the first day on the way from Mount Isa, the airport, over to the area that we're going to be basing ourselves near, 5-6 hour drive. Halfway there, 3 hours, we stopped at a little river to have a swim because it was very, very hot, as I mentioned. And the entire time, Adam's like, oh, crocs usually don't make it down this way, so we should be fine. To me, that's all I'm hearing is there's a chance I'm going to die. And so I'm going into the water like it. My whole life's at stake here. And I'm swimming in this beautiful, clear water, this fresh water, and scared that something's going to kill me, but particularly looking around everywhere, hyper vigilantly. Am I going to get killed by a crocodile at any moment? And I was nervous then. Then we get to about, what day was it? Then there was a couple of days in, maybe the next day after that. And Adam met up with his friend. Pretty sure his name was Elijah. And he was an indigenous man who was an expert at finding local flora, fruits, vegetables, etc., and bush tucker essentially. And he actually has just a wealth of experience in this area. And he said, well, if you want me to teach you some stuff, I'm happy to. And he said, let's go check this out. Now, he was fishing when we met him on all these rocks in a river crossing area. And he's taking me over to the river. Adam's already told me that he's found crocodiles there before. And then Elijah jumps into the water, fully clothed again. Seems the locals there they don't mind just walking into water fully clothed. Walks in and he's like, we're going to find some water or river potatoes. And so he was showing me this little water grass that was coming from probably the meter deep, completely dark river, meaning you couldn't see the bottom. And there's just a little bit of grass coming out the top, and he could tell that the type of grass it was that buried under the mud where it was growing from was this wild potato. And so he's in the water where Adam's told me crocodiles are, and I'm on the rocks going, holy crap, this is terrifying. And then he invites me in to go grab it. And another experience where I'm literally thinking there's a chance I'm going to die right now. Crocodile could come out anywhere, anytime, snatch me, pull me in, death roll me and drown me. And I'm like, man, this is terrifying. That's my second crocodile experience that I was afraid of. Didn't die though. Didn't die. And then day 7, I'm going to call it. Maybe it was actually before days. Maybe it was like day 4 or 5. I really lost track. I've got a notebook that's got in-depth notes of every single day and what I did on every single day, but I don't remember in this moment. Whatever day it was, we went to a coastal area. So right up to the coastal area of the top of Queensland near the border of Northern Territory. This is where there are saltwater crocodiles, which are the more dangerous between salt and freshwater crocodiles. These are the massive ones. Now, Adam tells me we're going to go spearfishing, but the best time to do it is at night. And we're going to be going into the water in the shallows, in the river and the estuaries where there are saltwater crocodiles. And he's like, don't worry, there's a strategy where you can figure out where they are. And so we had head torches. I am freaking out. And we're going into the shallows and he's like, all right, I want to show you something. And so we've got our head torches on and he shines the head torch onto this, I'm going to say 30-meter wide river and looking up and down the river. And he says, see those 2 red dots? That's a crocodile's eyes. And then he flashes 20 meters to the left. See those dots? Another crocodile over there, another crocodile, and they're watching us. And I'm thinking, why are we here at night? I was genuinely scared, but I was committed to finding food, and I hadn't eaten yet on the tour. So it'd probably been like 4 going on 5 days of not having any food. And I am really hypervigilant now because where we were was more inland in the last 2 experiences. Lower chance that there's going to be a saltwater crocodile there, greater chance freshwater, meaning slightly less danger or a lot less danger. Now we can see saltwater crocodiles. There were 3 that were within like 30 or 40 meters of us and we could see them, The crocodiles, as far as I know, unless someone jumps onto them or near them or goes into the body of water right in front of them, they take their time. They're patient. They're ambush predators that just stalk and look for patterns because they don't want to use much energy. So they don't want to just recklessly go after things and then use all this energy without getting food. So anyway, didn't really comfort me. But what he would do is say, "Hey, keep lookout while I'm looking for the fish, trying to spear fish. You just keep an eye on where the crocodiles are. And if the eyes disappear, tell me." And so I'm looking, and all of a sudden, some of the one that's like maybe 15 meters away, the eyes just go under because they're floating on the surface, just watching. And then the eyes just go under the water and disappear. And I'm like, "Yo, dude, 15 meters away, he's gone." And he's like, "All right, we'll get back from the edge of the water." And that's the strategy. That's the strategies. So got back from the edge, watched for a little bit until its eyes popped back up somewhere else. And we're like, "All right, cool, we can keep fishing now." And we'd swap roles. Then there's a small estuary that's a foot deep that connects to that river. And it's pitch black. Again, there's not another human being for at least 300 kilometers. And it's complete darkness. The only light that we had, which was not providing much light at all, was the stars. And we're in this little estuary that's probably 3 meters wide, a foot deep. And now we're wading through that water. And I'm thinking there could be a crocodile up here that's nesting here. Oh, man. And so that entire time I was just ready at any moment to just fight for my life with this spear that I had, stabbing it or whatever I had to do to try to survive. So that was a really big edge for me. And the crazy thing is that Adam's just out there doing this all the time. This is just what he does to eat and survive, and has enough of a general instinct to know if there's danger or not, that he's able to keep himself safe. And he's been doing it for years and years and years. But there are a lot of stories in Northern Territory and remote Queensland where people will get drunk and they'll dare each other to swim across a river and swim back. And they get dragged under and killed, and they get killed by a crocodile. So it's not like something that doesn't happen and it's like more hyperbole. No, it happens. And so far out, it was just scary. But I did it, and I felt an internal victory with that. So anyway, they were a couple of the big fears, crocodiles and snakes, and there was no big, beautiful experience with crocodiles, but that snake experience was absolutely life-changing and magical. It was the most trusting animal by far. Even when I, even when I held the frilled neck lizard, it wasn't chilled when I was holding it. It was terrified. So it was kind of freaking out. The snake, I wasn't holding the snake's body with and it had like it was flailing around trying to get away. The snake was like just left to its own devices. And when I put the snake down to let it go, it wasn't letting go. Like it wasn't leaving. It wasn't like constricting me hard. It was just sitting on my hand and it would not let me go. And I was just like, far out. That's wild. That's so wild. So it was beautiful, beautiful experience with the snakes. The crocodiles, not so beautiful. And yeah, so there are a couple of animal experiences that I had. So, all right. I'm going to tell you about a couple of other experiences and things that I learned from the experience. So when I got to this place, because I was feeling so out of my element, whenever I'm feeling nervous and out of my element, and it's a common part of our psychology and humanity, but I'm pretty strong in this area, I attempt to gain control so that I feel safe. And I like to know a lot about what I do. If I'm going to go skiing, I'm on YouTube. I'm looking up how to do it because I want to do things competently. I want to understand it. And it's part of my personality type. And so when I got to this experience, I'm just firing questions left, right, and center. So I might say something like, oh, what do we do when we capture the thing? And Adam will just be like, oh, you'll see. And what happens if this, we'll be right. And he's just giving me these short answers. He's not really giving me much at all. I keep asking questions and I keep getting these real limited answers. What are we going to do then? Which day are we going to go here? And I'm like a kid. Are we there yet? But from a place of, I want to understand what's happening, why it happens, what this landscape's about. How can I feel as safe as possible and as in control as possible? And then after a little bit, I'm like, dude, why are you not giving me more answers? And it was an interesting experience just going to spend 10 days with someone that I'd never met before in person and only had a couple of chats on the phone with, to trust him in keeping me alive, essentially, in the middle of nowhere with threat everywhere. So anyway, I asked him this and he said, look, I teach through a style of teaching called coyote teaching. And coyote teaching, as he explained it to me, is giving a student just enough of what they need to be able to handle the situation, but nothing more. So that there's a lot of figuring it out on the job and a lot of trusting the sequence of events and your own capacity to figure things out when needed. And I'd heard about the idea of learning just in time, not just in case. Learning things that are needed when they're needed, not just stocking up information for the sake of it. And I got around this, but this was a really intense version of it, coyote teaching. And I did some research about it recently, and apparently what it means in the purity of the word is that it is teaching through example. That's what it means. And it's a Native American Indian way of teaching in tribes, showing, living by example and being a role model. And it feels appropriate in this moment to share that growing up, my super well-meaning and super intelligent and super loving father battled a lot with mental health, battled a lot with his life, and definitely wasn't the healthiest father and wasn't the healthiest role model, dealing with a lot of addiction and projecting a lot of abuse my way. And he used to say this thing that in hindsight kind of frustrates me in one level, and probably more accurately, because that's an old story, it's just not aligned with how I aim to be as a teacher. And he used to say, do as I say, not what I do. Do as I say, not as I do. AKA, I ain't embodying it, but trust what I've got to say. But I wouldn't always trust what he had to say, because I was, as all of us are, especially as we're growing up, I'm sponging in what I'm feeling. I'm sponging in what I'm seeing, and not just able to hear that I'm being told one thing where I can see something else happening. So that was interesting. And it was an interesting contrast to have this new role model, at least for these 10 days, of someone that was teaching me through example, teaching me just enough. In other words, trusting me, not trying to micromanage me, not trying to watch over my shoulder and every single thing I'm doing, but giving me you'll be right, because the presupposition is you're capable, you're competent, and take a chill pill and trust yourself in the moment, which I'll admit it was difficult especially for the first few days. By the end of the experience, I definitely felt like I was living very in sync with nature, feeling very confident and very competent at what we were doing. I felt really connected to the land and really in my primitive masculine, like my warrior had turned online in a really big way. But that was an interesting piece. And so just sharing that with you now. Coyote teaching. Can you learn just what you need for the next step? And when you're teaching, because I know there's a good chance you're some kind of educator if you're listening to this podcast, can you steer away from over-intellectualizing things and give people just what they need next as a flavor to incorporate and as an idea to consider? All right. So the next piece that I want to share, which I touched on in the last episode, is that I fasted for 5 days, roughly, meaning I was drinking 8 liters of water a day, 8 to 9, but I wasn't eating. I had a couple of little pieces like, what was the name? Pandanus tree. There was this tree that looks like the top of a pineapple with strong, kind of like an aloe vera plant, but strong, thick leaves coming out the top of this tree. And using a machete, I cut all of the leaves off. And from this tree that weighed probably 50 kilos, 30 to 50 kilos, I was able to get maybe 2 or 3 calories, maybe probably more than that, like 10 calories, maybe 10 grams, 20 grams worth of white, young flesh, like ungrown, yet to sprout flesh, part of this plant. And it took probably like 20 to 30 minutes to get it out. Probably burnt more calories trying to get it out than it was to consume. But I was virtually not eating at all for 5 days. And I've fasted before. I've done a 10-day juice fast, and where the first 3 days was water. And I've done I'd done this experience as well. I was on this experience, and it just showed me that if I can fast for 5 days without eating food, which in the big scheme of things, it's not a crazy amount of time. I definitely could have gone further. It was just getting more and more difficult to hunt. It showed me the challenge I'd be up against if I was in the wild with no equipment and needing to find food, because there's a trade-off there. Unless you're in some tropical place where there's lots of fruit, which would make life a lot easier, but somewhere that's not like that, if I was out looking for food, there's a catch-22, because you've got to use energy, use calories to be able to find food. And if you keep using calories and you're not finding food, you're actually speeding up the rate at which you would run out of energy and die. And so after the 5th day, I ended up eating I think it was the 4th day of the experience, but I started fasting a day earlier. I caught a fish and ate the fish, and it was glorious. It was such a great feeling to have a feed. But for those 5 days where I hadn't eaten, I was fine. And it just showed me that if I don't have access to good quality food, let's say, for example, I'm on a flight and I get to the airport at 4 p.m. and it's an overnight flight and I'm not going to arrive there for 15 hours. And so I don't eat because there's no healthy options. I'm not going to die if I don't eat for a day or 2 days, or if I don't eat for 5 hours, or I skip dinner. Since then, I've regularly skipped dinner, for example. If it gets too late at night, I often just won't eat dinner so I don't disrupt my sleep. And that was a really big thing, not just intellectually eating because I should eat, or that's what I always do, using my intuition, using my discernment, not just the past. And one of the bodies of knowledge that I've learned the most wisdom from is the Vedic tradition. And in the Vedic tradition, intellect which in Sanskrit is buddhi. Buddhi means, in the way that it's translated, the intellect, the way that they refer to it, is the historian. The historian. Intellect is the historian. In other words, it's what we can leverage to look backwards in time and see what's happened in the past. But that's not necessarily what's going to work in the present and moving forward. We need to be able to utilize our intuition, which is pratibha in Sanskrit, our intuition, which is present moment, feeling into and perceiving the subtle signs that exist in our presence, and leveraging our senses to make the most aligned present moment decision. And so there's being able to use that present moment discernment. Do I need food or don't I need food? Very similar to the coyote teaching as well. What do I need now? Not trying to figure everything out of fear, or not using our intellect to look backwards in time and presuppose, hey, this is what's going to always be. And I feel that describes 90% of people in the personal development space, earnest learners and people that want to improve their lives, are coming from a place of fear, trying to look for an absolute solution. Who's the person that has all the answers? Eckhart Tolle says being present, it's what it's about. But then part of me feels like I need to work hard to get my business going. And then David Goggins has got a completely different idea. And there's nothing wrong with these contradicting ideas, because there's beauty in it if you can filter it through your own awareness to know what's most needed for you in a moment. That's discernment. That's discernment. But if someone's looking for the complete solution, the absolute solution, they dishonor their capacity to discern what's needed in a moment. I can't have it's freezing, but I haven't had my cold shower today, and I need to have a cold shower every day because that's what Wim Hof said once. That's not true. Maybe you don't need a cold shower. Maybe what you're needing most is to soothe and nurture with some warmth. But if you've previously decided, using your historian, your intellect, that that's how it should be, you're very impotent to be able to make effective decisions, because you're dishonoring your discernment and your intuition. Yeah. So that was a really big learning around the fasting element of the experience. The next thing that I want to speak to, and this is one of the biggest, there's a few different pieces here, but I want to talk about mental health. Now, I'm someone that has at this stage in my life at least, and for most of my life, have had a bit of I'm going to say, limited nervous system, aka my window of tolerance is a little bit thin. Growing up in a household with a lot of abuse and with two parents that were dependent on drugs, I came into the world being quite fragile and quite nervous. And then I overcompensated by trying to achieve massively and just going, business. And it worked. It worked and helped me as a child feel safe in amongst my father, my mother. And it helped me feel safe and conditionally confident in the world. At times, and incredibly insecure the other half of the time. But it worked, it did its thing, and I see that that's a part of me. But when that busyness ruptured through the overdoing that led to adrenal fatigue, and my meditation practice and spiritual practice and my devotion to my healing path caused that busyness to subside, what was left under that, which was always there, I just didn't have the capacity to really perceive what was present. I didn't have that perceptive ability. I was just kind of numbing myself all the time with intense food, intense actions, intense rituals, constantly going, never having a moment to pause. And the first time I paused really was when my meditation teacher challenged me to have a 7-day period of doing nothing. And in that 7-day period where I flew to Bali and did nothing, after 4 days, when I say nothing, no work. So just relaxing, watching a movie here and there, doing some gentle movement and a lot of meditation. 3 days in a taxi, it just hit me that I'd never given myself permission to really be worthy of joy in life. It hit me. I hadn't been able to see it before because I was always running to try to be better, to then hopefully in the future, be lovable enough to enjoy my life and receive love. And when I realized that, involuntarily and deeply cathartically, all this emotion came out, and I was crying in the taxi. I had to tell the taxi driver, I'm okay, I'm just crying. But I felt uncomfortable about it. It wasn't something that I did very often. And I could not stop myself. I was just crying and crying and crying. And I cried for 3 days straight. Just kept crying and crying. And it felt so overwhelming. And I was so scared that I was never going to stop crying. And that was always under there. I just never had the space to notice it. And so that's a long way of sharing that my nervous system is relatively fragile, which means that I can feel anxious. And I've always been like this. It just covered it up. And so when I went away on this experience and I was in an environment that I was nervous of, after a few days of being in there and kind of getting used to the fact that, yeah, sure, I could get bitten by a snake and we're doing these wild animal things and hunting this whole time. And that anxiety and any apathy or depression that I would commonly feel in my life just here and there on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis at least, it was completely gone. I was not feeling it. And this is the learning that happened for me in this experience. I went from outsourcing my food, trying to avoid cooking, seeing it as a waste of time, not enjoying market shops, and just trying to leverage that aspect of my life, speed up the food process, to spending all day, every day, finding food, looking for food, preparing food, hunting food, processing food, starting fires to be able to cook the food. And it was just so, all day, every day, from the moment I woke to the moment that I went to sleep, was focused around food. And the way that I would have previously guessed or perceived that I would feel in that situation is really unfulfilled. The way that the story that my entrepreneur, achiever, wannabe global thought leader would feel about that is that's not meaningful. It's menial. It's mundane and boring and too normal to be fulfilling. But the opposite actually happened. Whereas I was doing things, feeling relevant, moving, present in nature, I felt relevant. I felt a sense of purpose. I felt occupied doing things that were needed. And so if I cross-reference this with an interview that I've seen before from someone in the Hadza tribe in Africa who was being asked why he didn't live in modern society. And he said, are you talking about the part of the world where people jump off buildings to commit suicide? They didn't understand that. Why would someone ever do that? Because their needs are so thoroughly met with connection to the land, the purpose that they serve, finding their food for the tribe, being around community. And I touched on this in the last episode around the most exciting moments of just, I don't know if it's all tribes, but from what I've seen in multiple different tribes, the men are most excited about the day that they are able to bring their first animal that they've killed back to the tribe so everyone has food and everyone can survive. Everyone needed that man on that day or in that week to provide them with that food. And it's a source of purpose and service and relevancy and belonging. And even though what I'm talking about here isn't ticking all those boxes, because I wasn't bringing food back to a tribe, but I was definitely working as a team with Adam, looking for food together and celebrating what we found and what we had to eat together. But all I can say is, from spending all my time on something that I previously labeled mundane, I wasn't feeling anxious. I was feeling peaceful, calm. Even though I was using a lot of energy, I wasn't even eating a lot of the time. So there were times where I could feel quite airy and light and lethargic because I was hungry. But that mental health feeling that I have every now and again, if I get stuck in like a scroll hole, or I do a little bit of emotional eating, or there's overwhelm in my system because of the pressure that I've allowed to be placed on me, or I've placed on myself for who I should be and what I need to do, and the to-do list items that I should be ticking off, and feeling like I'm behind and rushing, this pressure of my mind. Whereas when I was in this experience, the only name of the game was survival. Get the food and live. And all the time spent on that food was fulfilling. It really was. I was super present. I was able to enjoy the experiences. There were magic moments unfolding. And it was so simple. It was so simple. And the really big transmission that I gleaned from that was, I can bring more simplicity into my actual life. And the first podcast episode back that I did for a little bit, if you go back maybe 30 episodes ago, was called Embracing Normalcy. And I was giving a big life update that for me, it's more difficult just to find love in a relationship than it is to go and tackle the world and achieve all this stuff and build a massive business. Just actually feeling a sense of contentment is more difficult. And so this experience was really inspiring for that. And it showed me that it was possible. And it was true that I could find a lot with a little if I was actually using my hands, immersed in the world, not stuck behind a laptop or a phone, scrolling, looking for short hits on TikTok, even though I don't use TikTok. I post on there, but I don't scroll on TikTok. But even if I'm on my Instagram and I go to search to look someone up and something grabs my eye in my search feed and I go on that video and I scroll a few reels down, just the way that I feel in my body in those moments of what I call head hypnosis, and what I would also refer to as sedation from our head that's trying to distract us and keep us under control. Those moments are really, really unfulfilling and full of suffering. That feeling of nervous system overwhelm, dysregulation. And that wasn't happening in nature. I was getting scared by moments of things, but they would come and then they would go when the fear left. It wasn't an incessant, thin film of stress that filled my system, which is what it's like a lot of the time. If I'm in modern society and I lose my center a little bit, luckily I have my meditation practices and a healthy diet and a great sleep, prioritization of sleep. Those three things provide a real foundation of support. But even with those foundations of support, I still felt more regulated, not eating, trying to hunt for food in nature all day, every day, than I do in my current lifestyle. And I'm not cool with that. And I've improved that a lot since this experience 18 months ago. But that was a really big learning for me, just to feel how much more enriching my life could be with less than what my mind and insecurities have me incessantly and obsessively seek after in my life. Bigger, better, more. And just all these stories and ideas and insecurities developing into attachments that they weren't there in the wild. And so my mental health was very, very grounded. And piggybacking off that learning, another learning that I had, another story or experience I wanted to share with you, was when the experience was all done and it was time to go back into society. On the last day of the experience is done. Now we're in society and we're in a town, and we'd been in complete remoteness for the rest of the whole duration of the experience. Now we're in town. And I went into a supermarket for us to actually get something to eat. We'd spoken about eating throughout the trip. And I'm in the supermarket, and the level of overwhelm that my system felt from the intensity of exposure was insane. The colors, I think we're in a Coles, and like the red and yellow colors just bright and in my face. And I was just, my head was almost spinning. And then the announcement over the music in the background and the people talking, so many people, and all the labels, all the food, my senses were just soaking this in and in massive overwhelm. It was insane. I almost felt like scenes of movies where people get back from war and then they go into like a overwhelmed panic attack where, I can't remember what it's called, but when their ears get flooded with sound, or it's like a loud noise has them cover up and jump on the ground because they're that anchoring of the trauma of being in war and the grenades going off and the gunshot gets reactivated. They go into like this freeze overwhelm response. It was like a very mild version of that, but still felt super intense for me at the time. And I just realized, because we were hunting and the name of the game was senses on board, you need to be looking in the distance to see if there's any signs of animals that could be food. You need to be watching everywhere and keeping an eye out for safety reasons. You need to be listening intently, using the sense of smell. What could we smell? Smelling different plants and just smelling in the air, and using our sense as to what was happening. And the colors of the Australian outback, where we were, not very vivid. What we were wearing is kind of similar to what I'm wearing in this video if you're watching this on YouTube, where there's almost like washed out colors. So I was wearing like tanned colors, light browns, light green, very subtle kind of camo, but more lighter versions of it. Black, for example, would stand out massively. White would also stand out massively. Bright red, dead giveaway. All animals are going to be like, what the hell is that? It's going to stand out from 2 kilometers away. Bright blue, same thing. Even bright green, too bright. And so my senses were hyper focused in. I was noticing the nuances and the subtleties and the bird sounds. And that was the name of the game for that 10-day experience. But then having that same level of my senses open and receptive, then when I went out into society, it was almost like a metaphor of the lens of a camera. I'm pretty sure it's called the aperture, which is how wide is the camera lens open, how much light is it letting in. And if you have the aperture set so that there's a lot of light coming in, it whites out the photo or the image. It just whites out. So you got to make it smaller so not too much light gets in. And because I was so open, then I was letting as much in as I could, because nature is so subtle and was so subtle where we were. So quiet, so gentle. So, yeah, it was the pace of nature. And then going into the experience of a shopping center and having my senses open fully, it was ridiculous overwhelm. And it was wild to be like, holy crap, I've normalized this. I've kind of numbed out most of my senses most of the time. But I think that was another thing that made my experience in nature more enriching and fulfilling, was that I was actually getting to let life in. Whereas I feel, because of the onslaught of the intensity of how much information we're exposed to, even without technology, but just living in a city, the amount of noise and houses and people and cars, and if someone goes into the CBD, you can see you could spot 10,000 people in an hour. You might not be able to count them all, but you could see, like your eyes would see and glance over 10,000 people in an hour, in peak hour of the CBD, people coming in and out of a train station. And in the tribal days, again, the population of Australia was 250,000 for tens of thousands of years. 250,000 people. It's over 25 million. It's more than 100 times that. So in the same big area of land, the equivalent of an entire suburb, there might be one tribe or less living on that area of 20 to 50 people. Now there's 2 to 10,000 people. That's a crazy difference. So the mind's taking in all that extra information, and it has to learn to disassociate in a way. And it really showed me that with that experience, because it was pretty unique to get to be living so quietly for that period of time. So that was a big experience that felt relevant to share. Just the power of mental health and how it improved. So a few other experiences that were cool. There was this magic moment after we'd been on this little hunting expedition. It was the middle of the day. It was so hot. And we were climbing up through these beautiful rock formations with these cascades, a river that was going down in all these different ways through these different rock formations. It was a really beautiful area, and we were hunting through there. So carrying the bow and arrow and carrying a backpack with water and all this stuff in it, and hiking, climbing up through this area. And no luck, no animals, and we didn't catch anything. But then got to the top of this area as we were hiking our way up through there. And we were just chilling under a tree. And there was I'm going to say a pond area, a mini pond behind us. And it was like a little body of water that had gathered before it starts flowing down the cascades. And out of nowhere, we just hear splash, splash, splash. And we couldn't see it, but we just hear all the splash. And we're like, okay, there's big animals of some kind. I don't know what this is. But I was just ready to hunt because I was hungry. And Adam could hear what he thought that they were. So he didn't bother picking up his bow. And he said, be really slow. Don't show yourself. Just peek over there. Like 20 or 30 meters away, there were this whole, I don't know if it's called a herd, but a big group of wild horses. And they were in the water on this super hot day, middle of the day, to have some reprieve from the heat. And they were all in the water, and they were splashing. They were kind of putting their hooves up and down and splashing the water. And there was like this cheeky wildness about it. I'd never seen this kind of energy from horses before, and they were just having the best time. And then within 30 seconds or so, they could sense that they weren't alone, and that myself and Adam were there, and that put a little bit of a stop on their play. But it was just so beautiful witnessing these animals, these wild horses that were just wild and free and untamed and cheeky and playful, splashing around, just having the best time in that waterhole. It was so cute. It was so adorable. And so there was that. That was a real magic moment. And what else was the magic moment? Oh, yeah. There was another magic moment, which is going to be an interesting one. And I've spoken about this on the podcast episode I did with Patty McDonald, Patty McTruth, one of my best friends, who has this real calling to support dingo conservation in Australia. Now, quick background on dingoes. I'm going to summarize everything that I know about it in probably under 5 minutes. And I really want you to listen to this because it's super interesting and there's some epic transmissions in it. But in the Australian ecosystem, 10,000 or so years ago, dingoes found their way from Papua New Guinea to Australia, and they took over the role of being the top order regulators, the top apex predators in Australia. And they took that role over from the Tasmanian tigers, right? So one thing that I didn't know is within any ecosystem, there are apex predators, which essentially means they don't have predators themselves. They are at the top of the food chain. They don't have to look over their shoulders. And on top of that, only a select few apex predators qualify for what's known as a top order trophic regulator. So top order, like top of the order, and trophic means animal, and regulator means they're able to regulate the animals. And they're the top order. They're at the top of the food chain and they regulate. And so dogs aren't top order trophic regulators. Wolves are. Dingoes qualify to be a top autotrophic regulator. Foxes don't. Tigers don't. And so what a top autotrophic regulator? I don't know if tigers do or don't, but I know foxes don't. So essentially what this role is that there is essentially two things that an animal needs to be able to qualify as a top autotrophic regulator. There's three things. They need to be an apex predator, top of the food chain. They need to be able to regulate the numbers of species in their territory that are the bigger animals in their territory. So the animals that are the size just below them. There's a whole food chain of top of the chain to bottom of the chain where, let's say, a fox is smaller than a dingo. So a dingo could kill a fox, but a fox could eat a rabbit. And so the dingo is not going to be hunting the rabbit so much, but more the kangaroos, let's say. Yeah, and the foxes, just to make it simple, and wild cats. So the dingo is a top autotrophic regulator, which means they meet those two guidelines. They regulate the animal numbers of the animal and the size below them, the step below, notch below in the food chain, and they also are an apex predator. Now, what this means, and this blew my mind when I found it out, and I learned from dingo experts because of my friend Patty introducing me to some dingo experts, is that if there is an animal so dingoes are usually in packs of 12 to 16 in size, and they will protect a territory. They will exist in a territory, a very clearly defined territory of 10 to 50 square kilometers. All right. Now, within that territory, that's all the dingoes world. They don't go out of their territory. They stay in there. And a dingo pack will, inside that territory, as a regulator, a top autotrophic regulator, they will essentially monitor the ecosystem instinctively. They don't have spreadsheets and manage their numbers through there. It's an instinctive capability that top autotrophic regulators have, like wolves and dingoes, where if there is a animal species in that area that are low in numbers, they will literally protect that species against other predators. So let's say, for example, kangaroo numbers were really small in a particular dingo territory. That healthy, full dingo pack will defend They won't attack them for food, and they will defend them from other predators to get their numbers back up. And if there is a species that's overpopulated, they will intentionally kill them to regulate their numbers. And it keeps harmony and balance through the entire ecosystem. Because let's say, hypothetically, they don't regulate the numbers of the kangaroos. The kangaroo numbers get too big, then they overgraze. So they eat too much of the plant life, which impacts all the small animals. It impacts all the insects as well. And that impacts the plants being able to germinate and maintain a healthy spread of wildlife. So the whole system collapses if a environment doesn't have a top autotrophic regulator. So that's the second quality. And the third is they need to be able to self-regulate their numbers, which is crazy. But what happens is in a dingo pack of 12 to 16 dingoes, there is a alpha male and female, and they are the ones that lead the pack. And then there is a bunch of other breeding pairs. Another cute fun fact for dingoes is that they have a mating pair and they go through heartbreak if their partner dies. So when their partner dies, they will often starve themselves to death and die as well from heartbreak. So they survive in their mating pair within a pack. And the alpha male and female, when it's breeding season, all of the pairs produce offspring, but then the alpha female goes around and kills all of the pups of the other mating pairs other than her own. And then she allows those other mating pairs to become surrogate parents for her pups, which is, let's say, between 2 and 6 pups. Yeah. Then when the pups become fully grown, adult dingoes, which takes around 6 months, they kick them out of the tribe. And if they don't leave, or the pack, they kick them out of the pack, out of the territory. And if they don't leave the territory, they kill them. And so they've got to go try to find other space to form their own packs. Or if, let's say, hypothetically, a mating pair die in a pack, they might be able to find their way into another pack. So anyway, that's how it works with them. They're able to self-regulate their numbers. Now, us as humans, we aren't able to do this. We don't qualify as top autotrophic regulators. But dingoes do. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink of water, a bit of a squeaker. So that's wild. And me finding that out, realizing that the reason that Australia has the highest rate of extinction out of any other place in the planet at the moment is because the dingo was labeled a pest, let's say 100 years ago or so. And it was in some places, if you see a dingo and you don't kill it, you can get in trouble. And it's completely within the law to kill dingoes. That you have to, because it impacts the agriculture and the farming industry, because there have been cases where dingoes will kill farm animals like sheep and cows and whatnot, pigs. Yeah, the dingo's essentially been labelled a pest. And as a result, the numbers of kangaroos in Australia, the population numbers are out of control. There's like, at the moment, 5.5 million kangaroos each year killed by hunters, because the government says we need 5.5 million kangaroos every year killed just to maintain the ecosystem. It's still in a steep decline, but that would not be a problem at all if the dingoes were just left to do their job, which they take great honor and pride in doing. So I didn't know this. I also thought they were dangerous. They're not actually a threat at all to humans. If they're in the wild, they would be nervous of humans and they just leave them alone, especially in this culture. They've been known to support with hunting in the past and get along with certain Aboriginal tribes. But yeah, bottom line is dingoes are crucial to the Australian system and they need to be have the numbers brought back up. And there was actually an experiment done in Yellowstone National Park in California 100 years ago. When they opened this national park up to people to come and visit, they were afraid that the wolves might be a threat. And so they killed them all off. And then from 19, don't quote me in the exact years, but something like 1920 or 1930, from there to early 90s or late 1990s, over that 60, 70-year period, the entire Yellowstone National Park ecosystem collapsed and just deteriorated over time. All the grazing animals, their numbers just skyrocketed, and they overgrazed and just made it a desolate place because they ate all the food. They ate all the grass and all the plants, and it was desolate. And everyone was confused what the hell was going on. And they decided to go, okay, cool, we took the wolves out and it's been deteriorating since then. Let's put a pack of wolves back in. Let's put a bunch of wolves back in. And within 10 years, the entire ecosystem was completely rehabilitated. They got to work breeding, spreading, monitoring their territories, being the top autotrophic regulators that they are. And the system that took 70 years to destroy took 10 to 15 years to completely regenerate, thanks to the wolves being in their natural territory and doing their job. Same thing with dingoes in Australia. But the government is not on board with it yet. They don't understand it. They don't want to look at it because farming is too much of an industry in Australia, and they just want to respect the farmers. Anyway, that's that. Big pre-frame for the fact that, well, the transmission from that is that dingoes are benevolent leaders. They're able to put the needs of their ecosystem ahead of their own. And that is something that I get a lot of learning from. There's a lot of other qualities I could talk about. Maybe I'll do a whole episode on dingoes one day, but really, really interesting stuff. And they are king and queen energy from a place of service and contribution and symbiosis with their environment. It's unbelievable. And so I had a few dingo encounters when I was in this remote area where there were more dingoes, still killed off in a lot of cases because they still don't even understand the roles that dingoes play there, but they're able to be there. There are no dingoes that exist below the dingo fence, the rabbit fence that was created, that goes from Adelaide through Victoria, through New South Wales into Queensland. It's the longest fence in the world. And there are no dingoes. All the dingoes have been killed off below that area. So anyway, we saw dingoes. I saw a dingo just bolting in one direction at one point, and it was really cool because I'd wake up in the morning and see dingo tracks just following along the perimeter of the track. And that's what they do. They just keep watch. They walk around the outside of their perimeter and they just suss in and report back and see what's going on. So it was cool to have dingoes in the area. And I saw a dingo kill a pig. I didn't see the actual exact kill, but we were driving along and boom, we just see a dingo bail. And then we get out of the car and there was a dead pig there that had just being killed, which was really, really cool. So that was a magic moment for me because I love dingoes so much. So that was a magic moment. And the whole experience was filled with learning, filled with wisdom. And I don't necessarily say that you have to go and spend 10 days doing an experience like that. It was quite a premium experience. It was thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But I would say that going and learning to hunt or having a hunting experience with someone that you trust, that you think is a good quality person, that has integrity, is a worthwhile thing to do because it will give some perspective and alignment to your relationship with meat if you're a meat eater, and understand the cycle of life a little bit more. Other than that, I would recommend just going and spending more time in nature, camp for a week by yourself or with a friend and just go hunting, looking, observing, even if you're not hunting, just spending that time in nature is so healing. But it was particularly interesting having a living off the land experience. And so other ways that you can have closer experiences that are going to be a hell of a lot more affordable than what I had are doing a vision quest. You can just Google vision quests, or you can put it out to your community. Usually in a spiritual community, someone will have a connection with a expert in vision quests, someone that holds space for people to do that. That's essentially when you go into nature and you stay in a small perimeter, usually of like 5 square meters or something like that. You pick a spot, you have a tarp and a sleeping bag, usually no water, and stay out there for 3 to 4 days. And there's varying levels of ceremony that can be infused into that experience. Sometimes there is a series of sweat lodges done beforehand and chanting and whatnot. Sometimes there's none of that. But doing a nature sit, it could also be called. Could be a really cool experience. I'm trying to clear my throat subtly enough that it doesn't give me the hiccups. I don't know if you guys get that, but hopefully that's solid and I'm going to be able to speak. I'm not used to doing podcasts. I haven't done podcasts for a few weeks, and I did one last night this morning. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Recommend that. Check out Adam Kavanagh. If you haven't checked me out on Instagram and sent me a message so we can connect, please do. At the Ryan Magic. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there for now. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Peace out.